Welcome everyone to the top 10 UI UX trends of 2021. I just want to make sure everyone can hear me okay and that you can see my screen. Is that all good?
Looks good.
Great. Okay. And please feel free to add in notes into the chat. I would be happy to answer any questions that you have as we go through. So a little bit of introduction on myself. My name is Samaya. I am currently a UI UX designer working for large corporations, startups, agencies, and I've worked for 5 years in the UI UX world. I'm a graduate of Carnegie Mellon. I started off as a mechanical engineer and then pivoted into UI UX. I'm also a graduate of Penn's Integrated Product Design program. And that's where I really got very excited about design education. So my partner and I started Ideate Labs LLC to make design education accessible to all. And we run workshops, free workshops every week or every month. So feel free to check them out. And with that, I'll just go right in and dive into top 10 UI UX trends. Please feel free to post questions in the chat. I'll be actively keeping it up open on my screen so that I can answer any questions you have. And let's get started with a quick recap of what's the difference between UX and UI. So people seem to use those definitions interchangeably. They put those words out there, but what does that actually mean? So we like to think of it as a skeleton and a skin. UX is the skeleton. It's the foundation. It's interdisciplinary. It's the structure of what you're trying to build and the reasoning behind why you're building what you're building. The skin is the UI. It's the functionality, the form, it's creative, it's visual. And in between the skin and the bone or the skeleton, there's the muscle, right? So that's the stuff that's where UX meets UI, and you're kind of working out the logic together and finding a solution that's implementable and actually makes sense to implement. So that's the difference between UX and UI. When we talk about UX, we're talking about what's the problem to solve in the first place? Are we even solving the right problem? And what are the needs of the users when we create a platform or an application? Are we actually hitting the needs of users? 50% of startups fail, or 40%, depending on which resources you read. And the reason those startups fail is because they've not met a key user need. They've not found the right need to solve in the first place. So that is what UX takes care of. UI helps to actually implement those ideas from UX, so what the solution is or possible solution, and then turn that into a reality. So you can take a very theoretical concept and then build it into a screen, a tangible workflow, things like that. And so with that, we're going to start with 5 UX trends of 2021 and then go into 5 UI trends, knowing that UX is more the research, the skeleton, the foundation, and the theory behind which what are the problems to solve and what's the right concept to solve in the first place. So everyone, talks about artificial intelligence, and AI has been a buzzword, I think, for the past 5 years or so. And every trends magazine, they'll always say, oh yeah, AI is the new trend. But this time, I think it's a little different in the sense where AI will require input from creatives. And creatives, I mean people like designers, researchers, analysts, product managers, sociologists, and even psychologists. And let's just take a look at the past year or so. It's only March 2021, but just in this year we've had Trump being banned from Twitter as a highlight of January, and tracking these organized group initiatives on Twitter and other social media channels like Facebook as well. And so you might think, are those good values but bad business? Because the moment Twitter put the Trump ban on, their usage went down by a little bit, and so just right after the ban. And so maybe they were hesitant to do that. So what's the trade-off between ethics, good values, and business and capitalism? And I think one really interesting aspect that is going on right now that is Percepta, which is a Penn-based startup, and they're actually using facial recognition to eliminate racial bias. So what they're trying to do is taking those cameras that you see. Usually those cameras are looked at by a lot of security guards in different stores, retail stores, and then the security guards look at the cameras, and first of all, they have to scan like 16 different cameras, but then they also have to kind of catch, okay, is this someone who's likely to shoplift? And so what Percepta is trying to do is anonymize all that data, so take those, cameras, images, and turn that person into just a blob, someone where you can recognize that they're a human, but you cannot tell what their sex is, what their race is, what their age is, what their gender is. And by anonymizing this kind of data, they can still predict whether someone is going to shoplift based on their body language. So that's one example of, in my belief, really ethical design and really considering and eliminating bias that exists in the current environment, right? A lot of products post, pre-2018, even 2020, didn't really think about this at the forefront. They didn't think about the values. There have been so many products that have been biased. For example, they might not be able to, take in or recognize someone like me who has a darker skin tone, as opposed to someone else who has a lighter skin tone. So there's a lot of really cool discussion going on within the realm of ethical design. And the reason ethical design is so important and design thinking is so important and research is so important is because our goal as researchers and designers is to really delve beyond the consciousness of a user and really get to their emotional needs, their beliefs, their attitude system, their instincts. And what we're trying to do is really design for an unspoken need, an unmet need. And in this way, we can challenge the status quo of what exists today, what are the social norms of today, and really design for that gut feeling that users have, that we identify when we do interviews and when we do utilize other research techniques. So what I found is that values-based companies and organizations are successful and have a loyal customer base because they apply ethical design principles and follow certain belief systems and value systems. And it comes down to trust. Do I trust this company or organization? Do I trust their products? And to what extent do I trust them? So for example, here's an op-ed on don't trust Facebook. Why is that? Why do we have this feeling of not trusting Facebook? It might feel like, well, they started as a way to rate women's faces, right? It's a book of faces, and especially in a college fraternity setting, that's what was acceptable. And then it grew into this larger social network that everyone is on. But the way they use your data and the way they sell and chop up your data is not so much fun to watch, right? In Amazon, we trust, but why? Here, there's a question. We do trust Amazon because Amazon is affordable, they deliver on time in full, and during the pandemic, they've really kept up all the supply chains, and they've really helped a lot of small business struggling to really survive and get through this really crazy time. But we still have that question of why don't we fully trust Amazon? And maybe that's because they have so much of our data and they are using that data in so many different ways to make us buy more and to sell us more items. And so there's that contradiction there of we trust them for certain things, but we also don't trust them. Patagonia's new movie, Public Trust, tells the story of President Trump stealing American land. Patagonia has always been an inspiration to me because they're a B corporation, but also because they challenge not only what their product is around and the ecosystem of their product, the ethical design around sustainability, but now they're going after things at the intersection of sustainability and even politics, and that's exciting. Celebrities, users pressured Twitter and Jack Dorsey to copy Facebook's ban on Trump. So here there's that user pressure going on to, influence Twitter to ban Trump. And I think what we've seen with this year is that companies are moving beyond just the ethics of their product, but are actually starting to take stances on politics. For example, Ben & Jerry's stating very clearly, we must dismantle white supremacy. And this is from the past year, 2020. Or Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, HBO, and other Hollywood players take a stand in support of Black Lives Matter amid George Floyd protests, right? And I think Netflix is a really cool case study that we could talk about a little more. And speaking of Netflix, artificial intelligence will require that creative input, but there's other ways we use AI, right? So some parts of AI are around anonymizing data and making sure that everyone is considered equal, even from a data perspective. When you anonymize data, you're eliminating racial bias. But there's also that aspect of selling and content curation. And it's really interesting because Netflix algorithm a few years back, they could actually change the cover image depending on who you were to kind of create an experience that was optimal to you. So for example, if my friend and I love Legally Blonde, but I'm a dog owner. When I look at my Netflix, I'll see a Legally Blonde with Elle Woods and Bruiser Woods, her dog. But my friend who's really into education, she'll also like Legally Blonde, but when she looks at her Netflix, she'll see the same movie, but with Elle Woods graduating from law school. So I think that's a really interesting example of the intersection of research design and algorithm design, right? How do people know to categorize users based on their preferences? How does Netflix know to do that so that they're showing you the exact right image when you need it so that you're going to click on it? And so they're using a more subtle version of clickbait. And I think that's a more nuanced way of using AI rather than just kind of like Facebook or even Instagram now, just selling, and being kind of in your face about the way they run their algorithms. Another example is customization and personalization. So there's a big difference between those. And I think we're moving from customization to personalization. So with Curology, which is a great example of customization, they have on the back end, I'm guessing, 9 different formulas that they will sell to their customers. But what they do is they put a quiz on their front end on the website, and they get to know who you are as a user. And then based on what you've told them, they're able to give you a customized solution for your skincare. But I think an example of personalization is Spotify's 2020 Wrapped experience. And that's such a cool experience, right? When you know that throughout the year, you've been liking different songs, you've been listening to songs on repeat, but now they created this Wrapped 2020 experience just for you. And not only did it have your name on it like Curology does, but it was actually personalized in the sense that they knew that my top listener was the artist Borns. I don't know how you say Bjorns, B-O-R-N-S. And I was one of his top 1% of listeners. And I think that really freaked me out. I was like, oh no, I'm, in this world of listening to this one artist all the time. Maybe I need to change my listening habits so that I can discover new artists and new audiences. And so I actually started to actively try and discover new artists that Netflix showed me. And they showed me in that Spotify Wrapped 2020 experience how many artists I had discovered that year, but also all the artists I'd missed out on. And so here they're leveraging FOMO, but they're also leveraging, the fact that I was so good at discovering things. So it was contradictory, but they showed it to me in a very personalized view. So my question to you is, what will personalization and digital personalization look like in 2021? And how much do you want an algorithm to know about you? What type of data is okay with you for a certain company or business to collect? For example, we all don't like or trust Facebook because we think, okay, they're doing something fishy with my data. But then at the same time, I'm someone who loves Spotify's Wrapped experience, and they've done it in such a tasteful way that I want more types of those extremely personalized experiences. So I'll just pause for a quick minute to ask everyone what their preferences are.
Hey, Carolina here. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking, like, for me, it really depends, right? Because to your point with Facebook, I think it's a lot about the bigger problems that having access to that data causes around getting in information and feedback loops, which, as we're now finding out, are really dangerous. But also Netflix, I don't want to sit down and search for an hour for a movie on Netflix. I want them to show me the one I want to see, and I just want to turn on Netflix and find it. So I think it really varies depending on the platform and what I'm really trying to get out of it as well.
Agreed. I couldn't agree more. Yeah. And I'm looking
Sorry,
at
whoever I interrupted.
Oh, no, that's okay.
Go
That's
for it.
okay. I completely agree as well. For me, if it's something along the realms of, entertainment, like Spotify, Netflix, it feels okay. But when it gets to anything health related or anything location related or any, that kind of thing, that automatically connects me to, um, I guess a group of people that maybe it's not a match, that kind of thing. That's where for me it gets a little weird. So anything health and location related, it gets weird.
Agreed. Yeah, I feel the same way. And yeah, and I'm looking at the comments too. So Sophie, I really enjoy Spotify Wrapped, and Angela, I definitely want to get a personalized experience, but not one that seems invasive. So I think we all feel the same way, but I think it takes a lot of research, right, and a lot of design thinking to really understand when are we crossing the line and what lines, what's the gray area, and how do we get people to gradually opt into preferences that then helps us give them a more personalized experience. So another big trend or buzzword is virtual fatigue of this year. And what are some creative AR VR solutions that can help us kind of connect on Zoom and feel more like we're in the same room, but also reduce or eliminate Zoom fatigue? Does everything need to be Zoom, or can we do something like a Clubhouse where it's kind of like old-fashioned radio all over again, but in an app format? So I think it's interesting to see the evolution of AR, and we're seeing how we started with video game avatars, right? Back in even as young, like early as like 2005, 2000, and those avatars were really crucial because then you could start to customize those avatars and you could personalize them to your personality. So when you're playing a video game, you can buy different costumes to kind of express your personality, and then now on Snapchat and on Zoom, you can create these filters to also express your personality and change your perception of who you are when you show up to a certain meeting. And if you want to be a little silly, you can do that. And it's all about changing our own appearances. That's what AR has primarily been there for, and that's what we've kind of used it for. And we do live in a very Instagrammable world, right? We try and showcase the best version of ourselves, the best versions of our life on Instagram. And it's come to this point with social media where we seem like we have to sound smarter than we are. We have to look prettier than we are, just because we live in that kind of Instagrammable world. And so an interesting case of AR VR that I would like to really focus on is Pokemon Go. And Pokemon Go changed the status quo because they stopped us from looking at ourselves and personalizing and customizing ourselves and changing the perception of ourselves, but they made us look outwards into the real world. And so what I think Pokemon Go started in 2015, 2016. And what happened was all of a sudden, there were children, there were grandparents, there were millennials, there were 40-year-olds, everyone was out on the streets with their phone, collecting these avatars and walking around and interacting with the world. And, a lot of news, media places reported that people were exercising more and they were going out and exploring their neighborhood, their backyard, and they were all collecting in little groups to, catch these avatars on Pokemon Go. And so my question to you is, how can UXers apply AR to motivate people, to help them discover the outside world rather than being so inward focused, so self-focused? Is it right to be always focused on yourself, or is it better to have people focus on the outside world? Especially now when we're all cooped up at home, I think we don't want to be too self-focused, right? But sometimes that ends up happening. So again, I'll pause here. How can we apply AR to just motivate people to look outside themselves?
I think this is Sophie. I think there's really cool opportunities. Like I saw this one app where you could scan different plants and it would tell you what plants you're looking at or purchasing. And so I think like building on that, there's ways to build that into like, oh, I'm going on a hike and I'm not really sure about what plants exist in this area. And it'd be cool if I could use an app to like explore nature in that way. So kind of building off on what you said of blending those worlds and like being more healthy, but also integrating this device that's like inevitably in our lives already.
Yeah, That's an amazing example. I've heard a lot about museums, right? So when you go to a museum, you could have an AR experience, or if you're a tourist, you could go explore a new city, or even your city that you live in, Philadelphia, for example. I could go to Philadelphia, and if I scan my app, I could see maybe what it looked like in the 1800s on my street versus the 1900s. I don't know history too well, so. Are there any other ideas around AR or how it can help people to look outside themselves, or look into the outside world?
I mean, I feel like as a curator, there's been a lot of art projects that have been AR where, you can't see it in real life, but if you, hold your phone up to a certain wall or location, you can see an art exhibit.
Yeah.
So that's been really cool.
That has been really cool. That's true. The pandemic has really brought out these really creative ways of exploring museums. And so before we get into UI trends, I'm also going to talk about digital twins. So this is the concept that leads to things like brain-machine interfaces or driverless cars. And so what a digital twin is it's sensor data that can be replicated within an actual product. So it's the product and its proxy, or its twin. And what that looks like is, if you think about a driverless car, you have the actual car on the road, but then you also have a proxy, which is tracking all these cars and tracking all the movement surrounding the car, so that the car itself can make better decisions. And by having these two twins work together, you're getting a better experience. So again, this kind of brings up opens a whole can of worms for the next 5 to 10 years on what will driverless cars look like in the future, and how do we get to a situation where we are using technology and this idea of digital twins in a way that's user-friendly. So for example, a lot of people right now don't trust driverless cars. We like to feel as users in control of our car, and we like to feel like we can control the car. So what designers have currently done is they've created levels of control or no control. So level 1 being that you're in full control of your car, level 5 being that this car is completely autonomous and it's driving itself. But there's actually all these levels that you can do, that you can slowly give up that control and give up your sense of control and actually start to trust the car to do what it does. And so I think that's a really interesting concept and a design concept to think about, because our job as designers is to take these very abstract concepts like digital twins and see how we can make it more applicable to the user and make people feel more comfortable using these new technologies. So with driverless cars, they're doing this with trucking systems at the moment. A lot of truck drivers get really tired and fatigued on the road. And so it would be great for them to be able to take a rest, but also remain productive and get all those packages that they need to deliver on time to the area they need to go to. So this started out actually with trucks and systems where these are, essential workers who need to deliver things on time. And so their ability to lose control through these levels was essential. And thinking about it, 10 years from now, let's say driverless cars became completely normal. We now learn to give up control of our driving to this car, and we learn to trust the car to do the right thing. What would driverless cars look like if they became a norm? So there was a really great article in The Atlantic that actually envisioned a whole set of digital products and services that would come about if driverless cars were totally normal. And one part of that article talked about how, imagine, on your commute to work, you spend an hour commuting to work, but instead of actually sitting there with your hands on the steering wheel, you now have this space, which is inside your traveling vehicle, that you can do whatever you want. So maybe you could hop into a breakfast car, right? And you could be eating your breakfast on the way as you're going to work. Or maybe you hop into a yoga car, and this is kind of like a Peloton thing where it becomes, you're able to see an instructor on a screen and you're able to do your yoga and have that meditative moment before you get to work. Or maybe you're in a restaurant lunch cart, right? And you're talking to other people and socializing with other people on the way because they have similar routes that they're traveling, but they also wanted that breakfast experience before they got to their work. So that kind of leads to a whole set of, crazy, interesting concepts that still feel a little abstract to us, but then it still feels a little bit more tangible. I'm looking at the chat right now, and Bob says, my wife really likes the park assist. She wouldn't trust a self-driving car though. That's a really good example of the levels of control, right? We trust our car to do certain things, but not other things. And I think we're still in that zone of playing around with levels and what can I trust my car to do by itself versus what can I not trust the car to do yet. And Eamon, I hope I'm saying that right. We all aspire to have a door-to-door public transit. Go on. Does anyone else have any other ideas around driverless cars? Do you trust it? Do you think this is way too far away? If you think about it, airplanes pretty much can be on autopilot, right? And those are very complex systems, and we let them fly on autopilot all the time. So if airplanes can do it, I don't know, can cars do it? That's true. People aren't in the moment looking at the airline autopilot. So, but the thing is, we are still trusting the pilot to make the decision to go on autopilot, but we are not seeing it ourselves. So maybe that's why. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, we don't have there's no sign that says like seatbelts on and also you're now on autopilot, right? That it's literally behind a locked door that you can't see. So you don't know what the pilot is doing or not doing there. The plane is going where it's going. If you're sitting in a car looking out the front windshield and the steering wheel is moving and you don't know why or how, it's a very different UI UX. From a lot of different perspectives versus, a public transit being on a train or a bus, right? Which is also having somebody else drive you, so you're not in control. I think that a lot of the difficulty comes with not the what's actually going on, but what that person's experience is, and also how it's messaged, right? You never hear about the many narrow misses avoided because of LiDAR detection that steers the car out of the way. You hear about the person that has been playing video games having their Tesla drive them to work, and has this one spot on the route where there's construction and they know that it acts strangely there, and eventually one time it runs them into the guardrail and there's a pile of toast left where the Tesla used to be.
Yeah, but I think what you're saying, what you said at the beginning is we've already given up our control when we step into an airplane or when we get on public transit. So we know we're not as in control, but when it's us in our own car, that's a very different experience because it's something that we own. Maybe it's our car. And so that idea of ownership, I think, also ties in. So those are all great points. I do want to be mindful of time. I know we're at 5:30, so I wanted to quickly talk a little bit more about Ideate Labs for 2 minutes. If you really are enjoying this talk and you really want to learn more about design thinking, that is what we do. My partner Chris and I have a 3-month program where we try and make digital design accessible to everyone. We explain it in layman's terms, but we also build that confidence in you so that you can create your own digital products. And how we do it is we do a 2-month big project, we do a 2-week sprint, and we also do 2 weeks to kind of present your ideas and communicate your ideas in a website or portfolio page. So what you would be doing is learning the UX side. What are some design thinking frameworks? What are remote research methods you could apply? And then we would help you practice with collaboration tools and then build that product or portfolio that you would like. So if you're interested in this talk, I have some contact information and we can chat more offline. But the nerd zone, yes, I am very much a nerd, and so is my partner. So you'll be surrounded by nerds too. But with that, we'll go into the top 5 trends of 2021. And again, going back to that theme of all remote, all virtual, this is the part that my partner usually covers, Christina. So if you have more questions on the UI side, she would be a better person to talk to. She's currently a senior UI designer at Merck. And so she's thinking about remote versus virtual from an AR, VR standpoint too, but she's also thinking about how do we make people comfortable, using these tools, but also using the tools that exist today. Her biggest point is that work from home is inherently unequal, right? The companies we're all working for are not providing our internet. So some people have really shitty internet, some people have great internet. But at the same time, we want to increase that feeling of closeness and team building in a remote situation, because thinking about post-pandemic, do we all really want to go back to offices for 5 days a week, 9 to 5? I feel like the new answer to working is half remote or half in person. So how can we accommodate for that time when you're remote and you're a remote worker completely? And so Chris's idea is about improving existing tools within the limitations of what we have right now. Like, I just have my laptop. Sometimes my Wi-Fi is a little spotty, but can we still create and deliver a UX experience that makes people feel closer together, or creates that sense of space like you see here? This is a startup working on trying to create that sense of collaboration by creating avatars of different people. And so how do we kind of minimize the design, right? How do we create these new and innovative tools from a UI and building standpoint that doesn't require too many extra gadgets? That way we're making it accessible to everyone. So Spatial is the startup that she kind of tagged, and it enables people to meet through this augmented virtual reality situation. And so yeah, this is kind of a close-up of what it would look like. You have a few real people in the room, and then you have a few avatars, and you have a screen here. And it's just playing around with this concept of maybe remote work can be the norm. Maybe we don't have to be all together all the time to feel really connected to each other. And Chris also talks about advanced personalization, right? We talk a lot about TikTok, and actually the algorithm that TikTok uses is very tailored towards who you are as a person and your preferences. But again, Spotify is another great example that we talked about before. And the UI of Spotify is really great. The way they create mixes for each of us, the way they talk about your top songs, they've really taken the time to think through different playlists that would really, excite you, and also mix and match different content. So you can see daily mix 1, daily mix 2. And the way this information is displayed is very easy to read, both on my phone and both online on the desktop. And I can scan through all these playlists that give me a little bit of the old, what I love to repeat and listen to on repeat, but also a little bit of the new, what I want to discover, and what I want to, I want to be able to be relevant too. I don't want to be sitting there listening to like 2010 music when everyone else is at 2030. So that discovery mode is also so crucial, and they do a good balance or blend of that. And going back to Netflix UI and thinking of personalization from more of a UI standpoint, it seems that, you even just looking at these categories and these playlists, it's that similar concept where Netflix knows that because you watch Narcos, you should really enjoy these other types of movies. And so creating those playlists, the algorithms that go into that, but also the way that these playlists are viewed on the screen are really crucial, and the way they're prioritized are very crucial as well. And another UI aspect of a trend that's going on would be touchless or voice-based interactions. So voice has been interesting because of Alexa and products like Alexa. It seems like one of those things that you can have only if you had that like crazy hundreds of dollars to wire up your home into a smart home and buy the Alexa. But if you think about the actual feature of voice-based, it's really to make things more accessible to everyone, right? Let's say I'm a pregnant lady and I have a 2-year-old on my shoulder right now, and I'm also trying to cook dinner, and I'm also on a Zoom call, or my kid is getting upset, and so I have to type out to my boss, hey, let's schedule that marketing meeting for tomorrow because I can't do it right now. voice becomes really great for me, because as someone who has to juggle multiple things as a mother, I can use this kind of scheduling tool and be able to be working on time in full, just like everyone else. And we've noticed with the pandemic, actually, women have been hit hardest working from home, because we have that added responsibility of family, chores, and taking care of kids. But voice is supposed to help eliminate and make that more accessible, make our lives easier as a group of people who maybe have a little bit more responsibilities. And this might be my own bias coming in, but there are studies on it. And so also thinking about pregnant women, right? So the moment you're pregnant, my partner, Chris, just gave birth recently. So that's why I have all these analogies on pregnant women. But when you're walking around, you need to, now you have this big weight you're carrying with you, right? So things need to become more accessible. You can't just climb up a large number of stairs. You might need a ramp to walk to the door. You might need the space to move around in different public spaces. So if we think about accessibility, of thinking of it from the perspective that eventually one day all of us will need tools like this. One day all of us are going to be old or pregnant, and we're all going to need extra tools to kind of make it easier for us to live our lives. So when we start thinking about accessibility in that perspective, it makes it a lot easier for us to empathize and then create experiences that should be more accessible to everyone. And this is a really cool example Chris found about haptics. So now you can use touch and feel to create a gesture when you drive a car. So if you notice here, he's using just his hand and what he's feeling from the vibrations in the car to steer the car and to take control of the car. So there's actually no physical piece of equipment. It's all haptic based. And I think that's just really cool. I don't know if I would trust it yet. I think I need something, I'm maybe a little old fashioned, but that's the concept of it could be a futuristic car. And we can take a second to watch this. So it's talking about accuracy. So now they're challenging me with my lack of trust in the system. And so that's that. Ooh, okay. And so another aspect of UI design in particular would be storytelling and creating these immersive experiences that really tell the story of what the product is and who are the makers behind the product. So let me just forward to these beautiful scrolling options where you're seeing different types of users interact with the product, and you almost feel like you're part of the action through the interactions and the motion that you see on the screen. That's what they're trying to create, that excitement. And they're telling the story not only with these really beautiful, really vivid visuals, but also the motions involved and that feeling of taking action. Same here, it's the motion involved, and this guy pointing at you, and it's this type of movement and animation that creates a feeling of action, taking action, and using that energy that you feel when you look at something so beautiful to maybe actually buy a product. Another big trend is unorthodox layouts, colors, and scroll. I'm gonna really skip through this really quick because I'm not a graphic designer, I'm more of a researcher, but talk to Chris about this. Bold typography is amazing, but there's this other concept of super apps. So there's this idea that now we live in a world where there's just so many beautiful apps already created that it's kind of hard as a startup to do the MVP route, right? When we create an app, we're competing with all the other beautiful app experiences out there. So what designers are starting to coin is this term called MLP, or minimum lovable product. So it takes a sliver of all the like delight and the usability and adds it to that sliver of functionality you're trying to show to your user. And this idea of minimal lovable product, I think, is really cool, because you're now creating a product that's delightful to the user and emotionally resonates with the user, even though you're a startup. And it's up to us as startups or smaller businesses to find that sliver and to really create an app that is a beautiful user experience, even though we have to be running lean and even though we might have a very small budget. And so a really interesting example of a super app is Facebook. So Facebook started as a newsfeed to look through the photos and posts of friends and family. Eventually, it became Messenger as well. So now you can message a lot of people. It became Facebook Games. You can play games on Facebook. You can Facebook dating apparently is a thing. There's the marketplace. They're even going into making currency and this, that, and the other. It's all very crazy. Or you could take another approach where you're starting to integrate your experiences with related experiences from other businesses. So I think Google does a really good example of this. Yeah. And what they do is they showcase different, restaurants and offerings along the road. But then when you click into that actual restaurant, they've integrated with, the booking system, right? OpenTable. And so now you're able to kind of browse as you're traveling, but it's also seamlessly integrated into this OpenTable experience. So while you're traveling, if you decide to spontaneously stop and enjoy a meal at Blue Plate, you can do that. And it's a very easy, seamless experience. So I would say this is a more usable, user-friendly way of doing a super app as opposed to Facebook, which is trying to do it all and probably won't succeed. And so those are examples of super apps. And I know we're at 15 minutes more, so I just wanted to open this up to be a discussion, and maybe we could talk through some of the aspects in the deck or just talk about what you're thinking in general about trends for 2021.
Hey, Samaya. I'm curious if you have any books that you could recommend. I can't say that I'm an expert in any of these topics, but I feel like you've raised so many interesting points that I would love to dive a little bit deeper, specifically into the UX portion.
Ooh, okay, good question. Let me think. The one book, I'm actually looking around for books. I've been trying to read Getting More. This is a book from Professor Stuart Diamond at Penn. So it talks about negotiations. And I think as a design researcher, we're always trying to bring different team members together to have consensus over the design. And we have to empathize with different teams, different politics within the organization. And so having those soft skills and those negotiation skills really comes into play. Think Again by Adam Grant has been another one I'm slowly getting my way through. I read very slowly, actually. So that's been another one where he's talking about challenging what we do know and what we don't know, and being really confident of saying, okay, I don't know this. I don't know what I'm talking about here, because acknowledging what we don't know helps us build better products and helps us figure out what we need to know.
For sure. Thank you so much.
But otherwise, thank you so much for taking